Welcome, and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Bill Lemons, the Director of Solutions Architecture at Fortinet Federal. Hey, Bill, great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And so, obviously we've been breaking down how the cybersecurity environment, cybersecurity strategies are changing during this event. The one constant, I guess, is change in the cybersecurity world. How can agency leaders prepare for a constantly changing cybersecurity environment? It's not something that ever stays static.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. Everyone needs to stay, if you will, hyper vigilant with regards to both assessing and adapting their cyber posture and being aware of the attack surface that is exposed in their own environments. So I think it's really important for agencies to, one, know their environment, be very aware of all of the various edges that exist, all of the devices, applications that are critical to the ongoing operations of the organization, have a complete and up-to-date picture as much as possible. Another thing that would help prepare agencies for that constant change is being able to automate where appropriate. There is an enormous amount of information that comes out of systems today, and being able to control and contain that information is very important. It's the only way to kind of get through the noise and see what true emerging threats are actually there. So wherever there is repetitive information or what I like to consider noise, the information that is known and should be able to be easily put to some type of automated task, that the organizations do that, and then just be informed about what the latest trends and technologies are in the space, and really embrace the fact that change is the constant in all of this. With all of those as background, making sure that you embrace that idea of change, your adversaries are. So you have to be just as cognizant of that, so that you can move forward.
Got it. Let's dig into that a little bit more. I mean, many agencies are still modernizing their networks, moving to cloud and hybrid architectures. I mean, I say still modernizing. They'll constantly be modernizing their networks, as any organization. But as they move into these more cloud, hybrid-based architectures, as the workforce adopts more mobile technologies, for instance, how will agencies have to think a little bit differently about security as they adopt these technologies?
Well, I think the biggest mind shift over the past few years is that security should not be considered an overlay or an afterthought. It has to be absolutely integral to everyone's operating plan. So that's really an important piece. So as you're modernizing, be aware. Even if you're just looking at typical IT components, making sure that those components are programmable, that there's the potential for integration with other vendors' security capabilities, that those security capabilities are extendable. So that there's more than just one use, if you will, and that infrastructure exists. Automation and orchestration is just kind of leading the charge recently, and making sure that all of the tools and all of the applications and platforms that you use, making sure that they have the ability to support the connections either via API or through scripting, some type of orchestration and automation function, making sure that those platforms are supportable in that type of an environment, definitely need to be addressed, need to be considered as part of that process. This hybrid model is going to stay around for a long time, and the ebb and flow of what needs to be on-prem, what needs to be in their own data center versus what needs to be in the cloud, I think is going to be a pendulum that continues to shift back and forth over time. So everyone needs to, make sure that all of those concepts are in harmony with each other, and make sure that they can adapt over time.
You've mentioned now automation and orchestration several times, so I want to dig into that. I mean, zero trust is obviously where the entire federal government is going on the zero trust strategy, that architecture and collection of security practices. And I know automation and orchestration is one of the key functions under a zero trust model. Where and how can agencies take advantage of automation to really support those security response functions across their organizations?
Well, I think there's a number of things to consider when you talk about the journey of zero trust. Zero trust is a mindset, and there's been a lot of very good documentation produced, both by government agencies as well as industry supporting those efforts, to help guide and provide context around how to approach zero trust. We understand completely that data is kind of the core element, the crown jewel, if you will, that needs to be protected, right? And really, it's zero trust in and of itself is really, how much trust should I give to an individual based on as much information as I can get, right? Identity plays an incredibly important part of that, but really it's more of an understanding of the situational awareness around each one of the users and the data that they're trying to access that needs to be leveraged to really help with that process. So that process is going to be a journey. It's going to be ever changing. People's way of accessing data changes on a day-to-day basis. The types of systems they use to get to it change on a day-to-day basis. So you really need to make sure you consider those kind of things, and continue to adapt the types of things that you consider when making a zero trust decision, as to whether data should be accessed or not, on an ongoing basis. You do that through enhancing visibility, whether that's behavioral information, whether that's telemetry associated with an endpoint, whether that's an understanding of the network activities that are happening at a particular point in time when a user tries to access data. All of those elements need to be integrated and part of that decision-making process. And again, I spoke about noise in one of my earlier comments. That element needs to be considered as part of that zero trust decision as well, right? So it's making sure that you continually enhance and modify that visibility and telemetry information to help with that zero trust decision, and ensure that any automation that can support the clarity or better understanding of that telemetry can be leveraged as part of that solution.
Got it. And I mean, you mentioned identity and access management, that plays such a crucial role in the zero trust architecture. And I think that's where a lot of agencies may have been focused initially, when the zero trust strategy came out. How is that advanced? And then one thing I wanted to follow up on was managing the identities and access of non-human, systems, users, I suppose,
Yeah.
to access data.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely, as data and identity are core to the decision-making process, it's absolutely imperative to have those very well controlled up front, because without those core elements, adding in the additional telemetry and visibility aspects in the decision-making process as to whether or not the user is the user, they're in an environment that's appropriate for looking at the data or gathering the data that's there. You need to enrich that information to help with that decision-making process. So really, those two aspects absolutely have to be foundational. And then it's layering on over time the additional components to help with ensuring that as a user or as a request to access data is continually monitored, you have the right additional information to assess whether or not access to that data should continue to be granted over time. That's incredibly crucial. So adding those components are definitely the things that follow on, and enriching and enhancing that data should be an ongoing function as time moves along. You mentioned non-machine access to data, right? So whether that comes in the form of an IoT device, operational technology that's in existence, sensors, control systems, whatever have you within the environment that still need, whether it's access to a control system or access to data or delivering data right on behalf of the sensor itself. It's also imperative that they may not be able to run an agent on them. Lightweight platforms, lightweight operating systems, minimal memory, the inability to truly adapt and provide agent code for every one of those discrete operating systems that are run. It's more of a point where a platform needs to be put in play that can essentially interrogate those platforms to ensure that they truly are what they are supposed to be within the network, whether that's querying and profiling those platforms, making sure that their communication patterns don't change unnecessarily, making sure that those systems are not reaching out to other resources that are not typical. So, network analysis platforms or systems that can provide that additional visibility, those elements are key they also play a great role in the human access to resources, but they can also be leveraged and from some perspective, they need to be leveraged to provide that additional visibility and telemetry to help with that zero trust decision as well. API gateways are another example of a way to, if you're not just assessing the behavioral characteristics of what those IoT platforms are doing, it's then taking it beyond and saying, okay, well, the requests that are being made for accessing the data, are they changing? Is there a difference in the way that the API is being leveraged? And can I be alerted whenever those events occur, or can I potentially refuse access? That's the kind of telemetry that's required for those types of devices used in a zero trust environment.
Got it. I mean, we've been talking about a lot of best practices as you kind of follow the trends across federal agencies. They received this or were mandated to move to zero trust just last January, with a pretty quick deadline of reaching some level of maturity by the end of fiscal 2024. What are the trends? What are the general things you're seeing across the federal agency environments in terms of where they're at with zero trust, where the leading agencies are at, what's working, and maybe what's not?
Yeah, so that's a little bit more of a challenging question to go after, because that landscape is pretty broad. I think, as you mentioned earlier, the modernization journey for some agencies is just beginning, and others are well down the path. It really depends on both the maturity of their plan, if you will, as well as how adaptable their infrastructure is to that type of change. I think the ones that have been highly successful have been the ones that have been able to truly embrace the cloud, as far as a resource to leverage. I think we all realize that the cloud itself has a lot of inherent flexibility, and if you will, the ease of supporting change, right? I mean, in its very nature, that's what it's built for. It's built to be highly adaptable, highly scalable, and come with the ability to support a great deal of change in a rapid succession. Not all agencies can truly embrace cloud wholeheartedly or for their entire infrastructure, and I think that's from history. We've seen that that cloud first strategy turn into a cloud smart strategy over time. And because of that realization, right, that while it's definitely appropriate for certain activities, it's not appropriate for all. So the agencies that have been able to move to that type of an environment have been able to change quickly. They'll be able to adapt more quickly to that environment as well. Where there is solid infrastructure, where there is a hybrid approach to doing these types of things, that's where the challenges start to present themselves. Not that they can't be overcome. It takes a bit more planning, a little more coordination, and an understanding that the tools on both sides of the coin, the ones that support the private environment, as well as the tools that support the public infrastructure, need to be able to address both of those areas of concern. And that's where agencies that have to deal with those challenges are the ones that are a little bit behind in the process. Not that they're not making progress; it's just a little bit behind the ones that are a little bit more cloud forward.
Yeah, some really interesting insights there. I mean, it does seem as if, as you've mentioned, the hybrid approach is here to stay. And if I'm not mistaken, we're starting to see some, I guess, cloud-based attributes then be adopted by some on-prem infrastructure approaches. Is that leading to any security gains from the on-prem approach specifically at this point?
Yeah, I do think that as the shift continues to cloud and as a service based applications, there's a cloud influence that's going to be in play. And when you look at private data centers, migrated to a hypervisor based architecture, which is pretty much the foundation of cloud architectures as well. It's just self-managed as opposed to managed by the cloud service provider themselves. So as you move along that path, the way of programming and implementing technology, both within the private data center and the cloud, are becoming very similar. There's a number of tools available today that help with supporting the concept of infrastructure as code, so that you can now not only orchestrate activities at the cloud level, but potentially across multiple clouds using a common language, common script for intent, if you will. And also have that also extend into the private data center as well. So leveraging those types of technologies to help with kind of simplifying the whole process of deploying those resources across those various boundaries, I think is going to be key to success, right? Is being able to have a common set of policies, a common set of procedures, a common way of both collecting telemetry and making decisions across that hybrid infrastructure is going to be very important moving forward.
Okay, I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about, future technologies that will be important to security. I mean, the National Cyber Strategy released earlier this year lays out how the government will really lead in investing in a resilient future, including through a reinvigoration of cyber research and development. From your perspective, what developments do you think will be particularly important to the future of cybersecurity?
So I really think that the AI, machine learning, by far have been leading the camp with regards to where a lot of the effort is going at this point in time. So a number of vendors have put a lot of energy, including ourselves, in trying to both leverage the knowledge that we've gained over time and trying to leverage those technologies to help with our own data ingestion and management and threat intelligence handling. Those technologies are now becoming a little bit more accessible to the individual user, the ability to not only put them in large compute farms, but actually instantiate those capabilities in appliances and even virtual machines that are supportable within the infrastructure. All of that type of technology, I think, is really going to be key to the ongoing success and extension of capabilities in the cyber landscape.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of taking advantage of historical data that you've accrued over time to really maybe train these models going forward, so they can potentially dig up vulnerabilities, find efficiencies, perhaps faster than a human could. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's it's kind of a double-edged sword. Obviously, you want to bring as much perspective as possible to a learning system like that, right? So that it has the most amount of context available. It's almost like putting together a team to support any activity, right? You want diversity and different points of view across that entire landscape in order to present the right approach, right? So training and learning associated with the AI platforms is an incredibly crucial part of ensuring that they can actually carry out those actions and move at machine speed like they're designed to do. But it also creates a challenge for the future as well. That is if you think about from another aspect, the fact that we all need to be cognizant of our threat landscape. Where are those edges that we need to be concerned about? The training and ongoing management of an AI platform is another one of those potential attack surfaces. And we need to ensure that we put the right levels of control as well as the right levels of access in front of those models just as much, if not even more so, than our own infrastructures themselves. So it's a part of the picture that has an enormous amount of promise, but also needs to be approached with care and with understanding that security, even in and of those platforms themselves, needs to be an inherent thought right from the very beginning, as opposed to a bolt-on after effect.
Yeah, essentially, from my very non-technical perspective, you're talking about potentially an adversary poisoning the waters of an AI model
exactly.
that we rely upon. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I was struck recently by the director of the NSA saying that, the NSA is trying to reach out to some of these big AI companies to help them understand how they are going to be targeted potentially in the future. So I think that's spot on. And then, I assume adversaries are also going to be looking at how to use AI to attack systems. As someone in cybersecurity, what worries you there if adversaries are able to more quickly, use this type of technology, then we can use it to defend?
The approach to dealing with artificial intelligence as a component of our adversaries is something that we need to take into consideration, just like every other product that's out there. They have access to all of the tools that we have, and it really puts us in the position where that idea of zero trust as a journey as opposed to a destination is something that we really need to hold on to. That fact that as these technologies present themselves, just like we try and take advantage of them to protect our own environment, they're going to be able to leverage these technologies in opposition to that end. So we need to be vigilant about staying on top of the trends, securing, making that integral decision that security and modernization go hand in hand, and continue to be vigilant about improving our overall visibility and our overall access to both management and control of those environments, so that we can try and stay in front of those adversaries as they continue to leverage these new tools as they continue to evolve.
Okay, well, Bill, we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Unfortunately, that is the end of our session here. Thank you again for taking the time here.
Absolutely. I appreciate the discussion.
Again, I'd like to thank today's guest, Bill Lemons, the Director of Solutions Architecture at Fortinet Federal. I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cyber Leaders Exchange.